Many of the women I work with have very full lives. They have careers, families, friends, lots of responsibilities. They are deeply capable people. And from the outside, their lives look rich and connected. But underneath all of that, there can be a very quiet loneliness. And it's not because they're isolated. It's not because they're hiding like a hermit, but because in some very important ways, they feel unseen. And recently, I was in a conversation with a small group of gifted women in one of my programs, and one of them said something that really struck me. She said, I just feel really alone. I feel lonely in my life. Now, this is a woman with a beautiful, full life. She has a family. She has meaningful work. I know she's very involved in her community and has many relationships. But what she was describing wasn't physical isolation. What she was really talking about was a feeling like people didn't fully see or understand who she really is. And almost immediately, as she was finishing that thought and sharing, another woman in the group spoke up and said, yes, you just articulated exactly how I feel in my life. And in that moment, it really hit me. So many of you gifted, creative, highly functioning women walking around in this world are walking through life doing everything well, but with this quiet ache that you're carrying most of it alone. And so today I want to talk about why that happens, because this pattern is much more common than many women realize. Stay with me. I think this episode is going to resonate with a lot of you. Welcome to the Power to Flourish podcast, where science meets the art of a beautiful life. I'm Dr. Andrea Line, positive psychologist, giftedness expert and coach, and modern-day spiritual godmother to brilliant, deep-feeling women. This isn't just another self-help podcast. It's a sanctuary, a sacred space to come back to yourself. Each week, we'll explore the emotional experience of gifted, sensitive women and what it means to live a life that feels as beautiful as it may look. Because flourishing isn't a luxury, it's your birthright, and your life is waiting. This is the Power to Flourish podcast. So one of the patterns I see over and over again with intelligent, capable women is that they often grow into a very specific role in their relationships. Think about this and see if this might be true for you. They might become the reliable one. Maybe they are the wise one that everyone goes to for advice and support. Maybe they are seen as the incredibly strong one who never has a bad day. Or if they have a bad day, they always know how to handle it. Maybe they are the advice giver, like I said. Maybe they're the person who is such a good listener and everyone goes to them for their listening ear. Maybe it's the person who helps everyone else process their feelings and big life decisions. And in many ways, these qualities are so beautiful and they reflect your emotional intelligence, your responsibility, maturity, wisdom. But there is a subtle downside to occupying this role for too long, or I might add, without any nuance. Because holding these roles, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but when you are consistently the strong one or the wise one or the good listener in a relationship, it can become difficult for other people to see you as someone who also needs support. It's not even a conscious thing people do. It's not conscious that you're doing it usually. So you could be surrounded by people. You could have really loving, beautiful, caring people in your life. And you can still feel like you're carrying your life mostly on your own. So I want to share with you 3 core ideas today. And the first one is that high-functioning women learn and become very good at what I call self-containment. What I mean by that is you've learned how to manage your emotions fairly well. You might have your moments, but you're pretty good at that. You don't have to necessarily rely on other people. You're really good at solving your own problems. You learn how to move through difficulty, just challenging things in life, largely without collapsing into a heap. And over time, this becomes a core part of your identity. You are the person who handles things. You figure it out, right? You just keep moving forward. And I can relate so much to this. And we all come to this for different reasons. And again, it's not necessarily a bad thing, because I think that there's strength in being able to manage our emotions well and know how to solve our problems. But this is a challenge. When you become too highly self-contained, the rest of the world assumes you don't need much, right? Like, why would they think that if you never are leaning on anyone for help? They just think, she's fine. She has it together. They assume you have it all together all the time. They assume that you don't really need help. And sometimes people's assumptions then reinforces the perception we have of ourselves. So then, we don't always share the deeper layers of what we're going through. Not necessarily because we're hiding or we're trying to hide, but because we've just become so used to handling things privately. So over time, this self-containment can slowly turn into something that looks like isolation, even if we don't mean for it to be. It might not be dramatic isolation. And you may think, well, I don't really feel isolated because I have lots of people in my life, or I have some core people in my life. But if you're being honest with yourself, you have that quiet sense that the deeper parts of your life and who you are happening mostly inside of your own mind. The thing is, the more capable you become, the more people assume you don't need anything. The second idea I want to share with you today is that your intelligence has and can, even in adulthood, create relational mismatch. Many of you crave conversations about things like, what you hold as meaningful. You want to have conversations about identity or growth or purpose or whatever. Those are the big umbrella terms, but things that are really important to you. You enjoy reflecting on life. You enjoy, thinking and exploring different ideas and perspectives, and you enjoy talking about deeper patterns than perhaps the average woman does. The many everyday environments, I would say most of our everyday environments, our workplaces, the social settings that we find ourselves in, even our friendships, tend to stay closer to the surface. That's just, whether you like that or not, that tends to be what happens socially. We're talking about our schedules. I mean, think about if you're married, this is very much true, I think, in marriage. We talk about things that are important, but maybe not quite so deep, right? Like the schedules and the logistics and the day-to-day things that are happening, the tasks that have to get involved, right? The stuff of life that does have to be discussed. And there's nothing wrong with having this conversation. But if the conversations that energize you most are about deeper issues and questions and things that you're feeling and experiencing in life, you may sometimes feel like an important part of you has no place to land, at least in everyday life. And that creates a very particular kind of loneliness. It's the feeling, it's the loneliness of being mentally and emotionally undermet. And again, it's not because the people in our life don't want to or wouldn't want to meet us there, but our life, the way it's structured, the way we tend to interact with people, and maybe even our own expectations and assumptions of the people in our life cause us not to go there. So there's just this mismatch. It can leave us feeling very lonely. And I'll share that for most, I would say, for much of my life growing up as a child, adolescent, and then definitely in my 20s. I felt this a lot in my 20s. I think perhaps because I was just becoming more self-aware and realizing the truth of things, which was a hard thing to realize. And it was that I felt pretty lonely. I don't know if I would use that word, but I think it was true. And it wasn't just because I had a full life and maybe I didn't have quite the robust social life that I wanted at that time because I was a busy single mom in graduate school and there just wasn't a whole lot of extra time for socializing. But I did have relationships. I did have friendships. I certainly had colleagues and peers. And even when I connected with them, I think I felt emotionally undermet, if that makes sense. The third thing I want to share with you today is that expansion requires mirrors. What I mean by that is psychological growth rarely happens in complete isolation. So, from a developmental perspective, like an adult developmental perspective, this just matters. It certainly matters to me as someone who helps people grow and develop into their adult life. We don't just stop developing once we turn 18, right? Or at least ideally, we don't just stop. We think about it that way, but we know better. So psychological growth doesn't happen in isolation. We might want it to be, we might try, but the truth is we grow most when we have mirrors. What do I mean? People who can reflect something back to us. People who can see our gifts clearly, not just our gifts, but our essence, who we are, who we really are. People who are interested enough to want to get to know us, to want to understand the depth of our questions and our curiosities and, I don't know, just the things that we think about in life. It's the people who challenge us and support us at the same time. This might look like mentors, thoughtful peers, friends who are, also committed to personal growth, or even communities. There are certain communities where emotional and intellectual depth are definitely welcomed. And you have to look for those, of course, but they do exist. And when those mirrors exist, something powerful happens. Your inner world no longer has to exist in solitude. And that's the thing. We could be surrounded by people. We can work in big businesses full of people that we see. We could have a huge network. We could have social media following of XYZ and this many connections on LinkedIn. And, even in our everyday real life with real people, not just social media, have a lot of people. And if we're not being intentional, if we're not careful about this, our inner world does start to feel like it's, existing in solitude. But we can choose to put ourselves in places, in spaces, in relationships where that does not need to be the case. That's why I love actually creating spaces with women, not just in the one-on-one work that someone can do with me, which can be very powerful. Of course, I believe that. But I think what we underestimate is the power of being seen and witnessed and engaged with in a group of perhaps like-minded people. Maybe they're not even like-minded, but just people who are willing to meet us and see us and witness us in our authenticity. When we can be authentically who we are, and I know that word gets tossed around a lot, that being authentic thing, but there's a reason why it gets tossed around a lot. It's because it is a key. If we don't feel like we can be our full selves and bring our full selves, at least in certain spaces, how can I live my life in such a way that I feel seen? We don't have to feel seen by everyone in the world. In fact, I would argue that's an unhelpful goal to have. I certainly don't feel like I need to be seen, understood, witnessed on a deep level by the world. I mean, I think that when we really feel seen and witnessed by even a very few people, and core people in our lives. That's all we need. That is plenty. And when we feel that way, we can go back out in the world and be our authentic selves in a way that makes sense for those spaces. Does that make sense? I don't feel like I'm certainly not going to be the same as I would be with a close friend who knows how to witness and see me in all of who I am. I'm not going to be the same with that person as I would be, meeting a stranger on the street. I just don't have any desire or expectation for that. I don't need it because I know I am seen and I'm not alone. And so that this piece of feeling like people are with us, that we feel seen and that we don't feel alone, it gives us that sense of deeper security and anchoring that I've talked about in other episodes. But this piece, the relational piece, I think is so important. It is important for you to have a good relationship with yourself, but it's not in a vacuum. The relationship you have with yourself is always, always completely interwoven into the relationships we have with other people and vice versa. Like it's this feedback loop. How we feel about ourselves, how we relate to ourselves impacts the way we are with other people, and vice versa. How we are with other people, how people treat us, then impacts how we feel about ourselves. You have choice and agency in all of that, but they do impact one another. So I hope that just reflecting on this today, it helps you think a little bit more intentionally about how am I going through my days? How am I going through my life? How am I engaging in my relationships? If you feel a little like, I feel a little alone in this, I want you to just sit with that and be curious about it. I'll leave you with 2 questions to sit with. First, where in your life do you feel truly understood? Look to where that is already happening. You might have some difficulty, but hopefully there is at least someone or some places where, or sometimes where you do feel truly understood. Where do you feel like someone really sees the depth of who you are? Not just the depth, the fullness of who you are, not just the good part that you present to most of the other world, but the not so good parts, the parts that we want to hide, the parts that maybe we feel embarrassed about or frustrated about. Who gets to see who you are? And the second question is equally important. Where in your life do you feel like you're carrying everything by yourself? Where are you the strong one or the wise one, the one everyone relies on or goes to, without very many places where you get to simply be human? These questions can be powerful starting points for noticing where connection is already present and where new forms of support might be needed. My friend, strength is a beautiful quality. Responsibility is a beautiful quality. Emotional maturity, a beautiful quality. But none of those qualities mean you're meant to carry your whole life alone. Even the most capable people I know need spaces where they are supported, understood, held, and challenged to grow. And sometimes the next step in our development isn't becoming stronger. It's actually allowing ourselves to be seen more fully. So, if this episode resonated with you, I invite you to reflect on where deeper connection might be possible in your life, because flourishing was never meant to be a solitary project. And as always, thank you for being here. Until next time, I hope you have a beautiful week and keep flourishing. Thank you for listening to the Power to Flourish podcast. I hope today's conversation left you feeling more seen, more supported, and more deeply connected to yourself. And if this episode resonated, would you take a moment to subscribe, leave a review, or share it with a friend? It's one of the best ways to help this work reach the women who need it most. You'll find show notes, links, and resources from today's episode at powertoflourish.com. And now just a quick reminder, this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. It's not therapy, medical advice, or a substitute for professional support. And listening doesn't make me your therapist or doctor, though if you're looking for a coach, you know where to find me. All right, beautiful one, that's it for now. Until next time, trust yourself, honor your gifts, and keep flourishing.